Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Soulful Abundance Festival. I'm your host, Elise Preston, founder of Be More Connected, and today I am so thrilled to be here with the amazing Jayda Shuavarnnnasri. Welcome, Jayda.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes. And so Jayda is a queer Southeast Asian sexual wellness educator, also known as Sex Positive Asian Auntie. She works to liberate folks from sexual shame by creating space for authentic conversations about sexuality, relationships, identity, and healing. The topics that excite her most are identity, sexual exploration, transformative justice, and non-conventional relationships. She's also the co-producer of Don't Say Sorry podcast, which centers the experience of Southeast Asian women navigating relationships, mental health, and sexuality. So welcome, Jayda. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you today around love, around sexuality, around healing, but would love to be able to start off by learning a bit more about your own journey of healing and how you found your way to the work that you're doing in the world today.
Yeah, thank you so much for for that question. I think tying in like the work is absolutely part of the healing, so I really love that you asked that. Um, so I myself, as a queer Asian femme and survivor of sexual violence, like that's kind of, I guess, it's not the start of it, but it's a big anchor of why I do this work and why I became sex positive Asian auntie or a sex positive Asian auntie. Um, in my own journey of trying to heal from my trauma and also understand like how the world was treating me as as a person in a femme body, as an Asian person, as a queer person. I spent a long time basically like trying to study and intellectualize the trauma. Not only like, not only for myself, but like I was really trying to understand it for other people. I didn't even realize that I had like trauma in me until like maybe college, after college, and I studied human services, which focuses on like mental health and understanding trauma and supporting folks on their journeys and healing. And again, it was just very intellectual. Like I was reading the books and I was doing the internships, right? And writing the papers, but never was it about me and what I was still carrying, right? And so for a very long time, I actually thought like, oh, I'm totally fine. Like my shit doesn't affect me anymore. And like, so then I can help other people, right? Like, since I feel fine, um, or whatever that means, I'm prepared to help other people. And it all came crashing down as I was in my mid-20s. I was like, oh, I'm actually not okay. So for a long time, I, again, was studying it and doing this work. And I was volunteering at a rape crisis center at several of them and supporting survivors of gender-based violence. And just certain things started happening in my relationships that came up, right? Not exactly triggers, but like just moments where I'm like, oh, like something is wrong here. Something doesn't feel right in my body. And
Yes.
and so eventually it kind of spending like nearly a decade, what feels like a decade of learning trauma, I had this moment where I was like, I don't even know how to talk about sex in like a neutral way. Like I can talk about all the things that we have to do to survive, but I can't even talk about it just from like a basic biological standpoint, like because I never took sex ed, right? And
Yeah.
none of like a lot of us don't grow up with proper sex education, right?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And then I was like, okay, I couldn't talk about it in a neutral way, let alone a pleasure focused way. Right. And so that has been really the journey in the last like 3 or 4 years or so. Decided to get a certification to become a sex educator so that I could just learn the things I didn't get to learn when I was younger.
Yes.
And that's what really like propelled my journey into becoming the auntie that like we all needed growing up, that I needed growing up, right? Like I needed a sex positive Asian auntie that I could ask questions to and kind of like share my experiences with without feeling judged. So yeah.
So powerful. And I think that we all are just experiencing such an intense like time of reckoning on the planet right now about the ways in which just sexual violence and abuse and even just aspects of like the deep disconnection and repression have just been such a pervasive part of the human experience up until this point. And it's so incredible, so revolutionary, so wonderful to see leaders like yourself emerging, creating more of the level of just deep authenticity and connection with ourselves, and allowing sexuality to be much more of a welcome, fun, joyful conversation that contributes to our overall health and is not something that is always at odds with it. And I am so excited to be able to have a conversation with you as well about how your work is really transforming and evolving at this time. And I know that during our pre-interview conversation, we had a chance to chat a bit about how just the concept of love in general is really up for you right now. And that you're just expanding the ways in which you understand the concept of love and being able to share that with your community as well. And so I would love if you could share a bit about this journey and just how your understanding of love has been expanding and transforming.
Yeah. It's so weird because I have never been like, I actually read, I'm coming out with an ebook soon, and it's all about love. Not to take from bell hooks, but it's about love. And it's so ironic because I'm like not the person that would ever think to write. Like, I'm not a romantic. Like it's
Okay.
not by like traditional standards. Like I was never that person. And so for me to like say that I'm actively sitting and talking about love nowadays is kind of wild to me. So it really goes to show that like it's expanding all the time, and it's transforming all the time in terms of how I relate to love and my understanding of it. And so I identify as like a solo polyamorous, kind of aligning with relationship anarchy. So I don't practice monogamy. And again, if you told me this like back in college or something, or 10 years ago, that I would be like practicing non-monogamy and then talking about it with people, it just I didn't even know those words. You know what I mean? Like those were not words that were in my vocabulary. And right now what I'm doing is really trying to explore love from an anti-colonial and anti-capitalist standpoint. And again, words that were not in my vocabulary, like maybe even 5-6 years, like maybe they weren't made, and so that's really the kind of conversation that I'm having with myself today, and the people that are in my course at the moment. We're really digging deep into the narratives that we've been taught about like love and relationships, and how they're informed by white supremacy, and how they're informed by capitalism, and how how they teach us to relate to one another. So that journey has been a long one, and it's interesting because it started with a breakup that happened back in 2016. And that breakup, basically my partner at the time, like he cheated on me, and it really shattered my perception of the world and how we were caring for one another. And he cheated on me with someone that was like, I considered a friend. And so it was like real messy, like real, like, I was like, what? It was a lot. wrote lots of bitter poems about this whole experience, and what happened is that they said that they were polyamorous, and that was their excuse of cheating basically with multiple people. And I was like, I don't really know about polyamory, but like I'm pretty sure that's not it. Like I think it starts with honesty, right? Like I was like, oh, something's not adding up. And so what I did, I went into this intellectual like research mode. as I did with my trauma.
Yeah.
And I decided to like buy the books and read the articles. I went to like support groups and tried to basically learn like, what is polyamory? What is non-monogamy? Why do people do it? How does it work? And then also always coming from a lens of like, as a person of color, as an Asian woman, like, those are layers that like I always think about in terms of how other people are relating to me, especially in relationship. And a lot of the polyamorous folks that I, were, I guess, learning from at the time, where it's pretty much from a white lens. And I was really trying to, again, like look at the way that we were relating to one another and loving on each other from not that, if you will. Yeah. So my journey has been kind of wild. And now I'm here trying to be like, I don't, what I've really found in my exploration is that all of us want the same things, no matter what relationship structure, fits us, right? Like whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous, whatever style, like we all want to be cared for. We all want to be seen, right? We all want to be heard. We want to feel safe, right? Like those are really universal things that every human being needs to kind of just be in this world. So yeah.
Yes. And I'm curious to be able to hear a bit more about what you have been uncovering from that intellectual lens, but also just from your own personal experience, and being able to break this down a bit more for people who may be completely new to thinking about love from an anti-capitalist lens, and even being able to introduce us to yes, some of the concepts that you were describing, like and now I'm forgetting the language, but it was a phrase that I hadn't heard before, which was like an anarchist when it comes to relationship
anarchy.
relationship anarchy.
Yeah.
So just like break this down for us. I'd love
Absolutely.
to understand more deeply.
Absolutely. Yeah, not a term that you hear thrown around. Definitely not in the Disney fairy tales when it comes to like
Right?
relationship anarchists. And yeah, so like in my journey, for me, once I really dived into this, right, like a few years ago, I started realizing that my monogamy was compulsory. And what that means is that like I was operating from this monogamous lens, entering these relationships because I thought that's how you're supposed to be in relationship to one another. Like that's the only way I saw modeled around me. And yeah, like even though I had so many moments where I had feelings for multiple people, but I was like, okay, well, I guess I kind of like you more a little than more than the other person. So I choose you, or like we're gonna, it would always come to a point of people trying to define what this relationship is, and then just making a decision based on that. I was like, all right, I guess this is cool. But I never felt like I was actively consciously choosing it. I just didn't know that I had other options, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's for me really similar to my heterosexuality as well, where I thought, all right, this is what you do. This is how I go about in the world. Like,
yeah,
cis men were easily accessible to me because they're the ones that hit on me most, right? And so that's what's available. And I feel like I didn't have the space to explore my sexuality on my own terms, right? And because we live in a very heteronormative society, it's really easy for most of us to just be like, yeah, I guess I'm straight, yeah. And so going back to sort of this relationship anarchy and concepts of like monogamy, compulsory monogamy and toxic monogamy, when it comes to relationship anarchy, I align with that concept is because it is basically saying that all of these scripts like don't apply to me, and I get to design my relationships however I want.
Yes.
Right. Like I get to be in love, in community, in sexual relationships, like in whatever way that I need. And the important part for me, the biggest part is that romantic relationships are not placed at the top of a hierarchy in comparison to our friendships or to our familial relationships or to our connections with strangers. And even further, like for me, our connection to the earth, right? Like my romantic partnership is not more important to me than my connection to this land. And so that for me is how I like, I guess, internalize this relationship anarchy of like really dismantling all of our constructs that we have in this society around what it means to be in relationship to one another.
Yes. Ooh, and I think this is just such a such like a beautiful and nuanced conversation. And love the way that you were describing that found at its foundation. This is about each individual getting to decide however they want their relationships to look like for them.
Yeah.
And being able to shift out of some of those just more conditioned, compulsory ways of operating and ways of being. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to be able to chat a bit more as well about some of the ways that you support your clients and community members with expanding their capabilities to love themselves and others more.
Yeah. It's, you know, everyone is on their own journey. And I think the people that come to me kind of see like, okay, I don't know who else I can talk to about my questions around monogamy, right? And I work with people who are monogamous as well as maybe exploring non-monogamy, but not quite sure. And then people who are for sure like practicing polyamory, right? So there's a spectrum of folks that I work with. And I think what it comes down to for me is I just want people to have the space to ask the questions. I want people to have the space to be curious about what they need, how to get it, you know, and how they want to be loved. And I think the reason why folks come to me is because in other spaces, it's still very like, not only monogamous driven, but even in polyamorous spaces, it's very couple driven. Like it's really by the idea of two people and sometimes still building a family and like, you know, things like that not everyone aligns with. And so for my work, like I really start with helping folks internalizing that every single one of us is worthy of love simply because we exist. Like you literally don't have to do anything for it. Right. And in the typical scripts of love and relationships, it like, especially in living in a capitalist society, it tells us that love is like a finite resource, right? That there's only one true love in your entire life, right? Like, and that they're really hard to find. So you better do everything that you can, make yourself look pretty, get that career, blah, 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 set yourself up so that you find that one true perfect partner, right? Like it's as if our entire lives are set up just chasing after this person, right? And that's capitalism. Like that right there is like, you have to fight for love. You have to earn it. And in our society, we have like almost this disdain for people who stay single and want to stay single or like don't want to be in a quote unquote committed relationship. And we view being in a, you know, exclusive monogamous relationship as a marker of adulthood in some way, right? In our society again. So it's like this hierarchy that, right, 100%. Is placed. Yeah. And like capitalism telling you like, this is all what we should be doing. This is how you do it.
And there's only one way to do it.
There's only one way to do it. Right. And like breaking your back and like compromising who you are in order to be in that relationship. Right. And so I really just help folks sit with that. Like it's not an easy thing, but I really help folks sit with kind of these narratives that have been internalized for a very long time. And I think, again, that's why that helps whether you're monogamous or not monogamous to explore this kind of lens. Right. And I think when I say explore this lens, like exploring non-monogamy, because the principles within non-monogamy kind of challenge us to think about whether or not, this is the type of relationship structure that I actually want to be in. And then if monogamy is for you, how can you make it so that your monogamy is a conscious choice and not one that you're defaulting to? Yeah.
Yes, I think that is just a beautiful framework that I hadn't necessarily thought about until you just articulated it that way, that the principles of non-monogamy is what opens the door and welcomes in more of that aligned freedom and choice around understanding relationship dynamics in a way that actually feel right and true for you. And yeah, I'm just thinking about in my own personal experience, feeling a lot of those pressures around monogamy and relationship. And then also just being, I guess, a witness to a lot of different dynamics and circumstances where, yeah, just the level of competition that's involved that like pits people against each other in order to find this like perfect match.
Yep.
The level of the ways in which we do like compromise who we are and compromise our values just in order to maintain certain connections and certain relationships that are not healthy, that are not serving us, that are actually causing harm, just for the sake of being able to remain like compliant in this system and be seen as worthy and valuable because you are remaining in a pair, in a couple, in a match, which is seen as more worthy than being single. So there's just so many different ways that it's just become so programmed and so normalized for our relationships to operate in particular ways. And I think that these principles, as you described, these principles of non-monogamy can just support us with being able to take a more, I wanted to say critical lens, but it's not even critical lens. It's like be able to operate beyond the limitations and the barriers and the boundaries of like what is known.
Yeah.
And I'd love to be able to also hear from you a bit about some of your own current growth edges in your life and your spiritual practice.
Yeah. I mean, all the time. There's so many things.
Right.
I mean, I'm constantly learning, and I think when you commit to learning about love, like I don't think it's I don't really know. It's almost like, where do you go? There's no real solid answer, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe my growth edge right now is just being like, this is I've actually always been okay with like not knowing that things are going to be, where things are going. And I don't even know that that's my growth edge anymore, but it's more like believing that where I'm at right now in understanding love and in my journey with my own personal journey with non-monogamy, like this is the right decision for me. Because I think I still get, people are always going to think that like it's weird or like I don't understand what you're saying, especially if I'm like, oh, anti-colonial conversations about love. Like people are, people are going to know what that means.
Sure.
I think right now it's trusting that I'm like the right vessel for this message.
Love that.
I think that's what it is for me right now, because I think that what I'm doing is strange to a lot of people and sometimes to myself. Like even to my own partner, as I'm sharing some like, little epiphanies I have. And I'm like, do you follow? Does this make sense? Or to my friends. And I think, yeah, just trusting that this is, I'm the vessel and this is the message. How it's received, it's how it's going to be received.
Ooh, yes. And that really, really resonates for me as well. And just love the way that you said that, trusting that I'm the right vessel for this message. And I think that will be so powerful for a lot of folks tuning in from this audience because we are speaking to a lot of folks who identify as leaders and healers and change makers, and the values, the visions, the things that want to be channeled through us are things that are outside of the norm, that seem probably pretty weird to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make them any less worthy or valuable. It actually means that they're able to be more transformational, create more shift and change, disrupt systems and patterns that have been in place for far too long that maybe aren't serving. And so I really appreciate you bringing that to the surface and sharing that, because I think that's like a mantra. That's an affirmation.
Right. I should write that down after.
Can be supportive for a lot of us.
Yeah.
Trusting that I am the right vessel for this message. Yeah. Oh, so good. And would like to start to bring our conversation to a close by asking you the question that I ask all of our guests, which is, what does soulful abundance mean to you?
Yes. That's such a beautiful name, by the way. Like I love it. I think soulful abundance for me is just coming from a place of deep love for myself and others. Like if I feel abundant in my soul, right? And I feel like I know that I'm receiving love everywhere. It's so much easier for me to love myself and then overflow into other people. And so that's what I think of when I think of soulful abundance. And that everything that I do comes from the belief that I am worthy of being cared for, right? And because I know I'm worthy of being cared for, and I know that I'm connected to this earth and interdependent to other human beings, that means everyone in the world is also worthy of being cared for. Right? So to me, it's just like this beautiful web, right? Where we all feel this soulful abundance.
Gorgeous. And so I know that our audience is going to be very excited about learning the ways that they can stay connected with you. So I would love if you could share that, and also maybe share a little bit about your free gift and what folks can expect from that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I forgot what I sent over. Was it a non-monogamy webinar?
I think so.
My bad.
Good.
I was like, was it a playlist? Was it a non-monogamy? Yeah, yes. Yeah. So for folks who are interested in finding me, knowing more about my work, my website is auntiejayda.com. It's AUNTIEJAYDA.com. I'm on Instagram as well. That's probably the most active kind of like platform that I'm on, at jayda_kissed. And my free gift is a pre-recorded webinar called Is Non-Monogamy for Me? And it's a webinar that, has resonated with so many people at this point. Just again, I get people who are curious. I get people who are down to explore outside of the norms that they've been told. And so, that's my gift. I go over some kind of basic vocabulary. So again, like relationship anarchy might be a new word for people, or compulsory monogamy. And so I go over some basic vocabulary and also explanations as to why people might want to explore non-monogamy, in hopes that it gives people a little bit of a, like some questions to marinate on, like, is this what I feel, and so it's like a start basically, because the whole like polyamorous space can be very confusing. So it's just like a small way for people to start their journey.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that generous gift. And thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom today. It's been such a pleasure to connect with you. And to everyone tuning in, I'm so looking forward to staying connected with you throughout the course of this summit. See you again tomorrow.